We need a 1, 2, 3, go.
All right, well, we are indeed live. I'm Shannon Williams, the CEO of the Home Furnishings Association, and today's webinar is on generational consumer buying trends for 2025. So we're going to be looking at what we should expect. We're going to talk about some of the actionable insights, really on how do you adapt your marketing and your consumer engagement strategies to really connect with each demographic and work on increasing sales, which I think is a hot topic on everyone's mind. What we're constantly hearing from retailers is where are those sales and how do we get them up? And we're also going to look at some different tactics like leveraging technology and creating personalized experiences, just to better cater to some of the diversity of your customer base and their needs. If you want to go back and watch this, which I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of juice, we've got some amazing people on today. This webinar is being recorded and it is available on demand at myhfa.org/webinar. If you have any questions, hit that Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and we are going to answer as many as time allows. And then before we get started, I'd like to thank Synchrony, who is our education thought leadership sponsor. And for those who are listening, and we are going to present Synchrony's challenge code for 1,000 points at the end of today's webinar. So thanks for hanging in to the end. All right, let's get down to our panel of experts. First, I have Jonathan Preciado, and he is the Vice President of Strategic Research and Insights Communication at Synchrony. He leads the development of consumer and industry trend insights. His strategic guidance on market research, consumer behavior, and retail evolution to help business navigate a rapidly changing marketplace. I have Scott Wyman, who is the head of strategy for Elevate, which is a marketing agency that helps retailers grow through strategic storytelling and lead generation. Elevate specifically specializes in market strategy, digital marketing, video production, and data-driven consumer research. Melissa Peacock, who I'm sure you guys have seen before, is the founder of the Strategic Peacock, a social media strategy and marketing consultancy, which helps small businesses grow their online presence by identifying and understanding the behaviors of your store's target audience. She's also a full-time lecturer in Charles H. Sandage Department of Advertising at the University of Illinois. And we have Stephanie Lena, who is the principal designer for Lena Design. She's an award-winning product designer and the principal furniture designer. She studies the way consumers shop and decorate their homes so that her furniture designs are on trend and on time. Stephanie is adept at identifying key trends and understanding the latest buying trends that are influencing millennials, Gen X, and baby boomers. So guys, thank you so much for joining us today, because this is like an amazing panel. I'd like just want to take as much as I can out of your brain, but we're talking generational buying. And one of the biggest questions that I have all the time, I know Scott's shaking his head because he's waiting for this question to come up. I think everyone wants to figure out, how do I increase sales? And Scott, I'm not going to put you on the spot and say, Scott, how do we increase sales? I know you were waiting for it, but I'm not going to do that for you. But let's talk a little bit about this. A lot of the different questions that came in talked about, how do I reach different consumers and throughout the different generations? So I'm going to throw this up right at the beginning for you guys, because I think this is a really diverse point of conversation. Just talking through, there are many, many, many different types of consumers, many, many, many different ways that we're accessing them, that they're engaging in our brand. So a lot of questions around, do we advertise to everybody, or are we advertising to segments? So can we just start there from a very high level? There are so many different types of shoppers. Where should a retailer be thinking and begin? I'm going to throw this right up for whoever wants to grab it.
Yeah.
Go for it.
No, this is a great question. Great way to start off the conversation. And what we are seeing just through our research is customized personalization is a requirement. So understanding who your demographic is going into, we have all these Google Analytics, we have all these tools, we know who it is, but we need to truly understand what is the motive and what is the emotion behind bringing these people in. So I just want to start, everybody take out a pen and write this down. The 3 why deep. We need to be asking our consumers why, and why. Why did you come into our store? Well, because I wanted to buy this table, right? Why did you buy the table? Well, because it's really durable and I have kids and they're eating Cheerios and spilling them everywhere. Now we have an understanding of why these people are coming to us. Do that 10 times and you can really build out your persona. So customization is important here.
Marissa, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to echo that. I was going to say something very similar. in that yes, everyone can buy your products, but you're advertising to someone very particular, right? And so it's so much easier for us to create those customized, personalized experiences when we are thinking of our audience as an actual person, right? We can write copy, we can design, so much easier for when we can kind of understand who they are, what are their motivations, where do they live, what are their pain points, what are their frustrations, what are their motivations, their opportunities, their goals, right? So when our audience becomes less of a general audience and a more specific person, it just makes it a little bit easier for us to really customize those experiences for them because they are human, right? And that's what our customers are. They're not this monolith. They're, very specific people with very specific goals.
And we actually see in some of our research that that is the expectation when they're engaging with a brand or retailer. They want something personalized and they're willing. They're saying, you know what, if there's some kind of an analytical backend that's using my personal data, using cookies to deliver something personalized, I'm totally comfortable with that. And it's fine if it's going to maybe remove some friction or make it easier for me to find that perfect dining room table that my kids could spill their Cheerios on and it's going to last.
To that point, Jonathan, you have a great point because those cookies, the retargeting, it's that second follow-up that's going to be really crucial, right? Every demographic is going to want a different experience on that retargeting. Your millennials, they're going to want more of an influencer based. Your Gen Xers, they're going to want more of an educational piece, something that can really highlight the product details. So great point there, Jonathan.
Stephanie, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Well, I mean, just diving in a little further in, we start talking about, the sustainability factor and different things that drive people to want to buy. You want to talk about the quality story and all the different design trends. And so there's such a big picture to this, in terms of the targeted marketing.
So can we go back to what exactly what you're saying and what Scott mentioned earlier, looking at that motive, looking at that emotion? Can we break down kind of our three buyers that are in the market today, our millennials, our boomers, and our Gen X? And can we talk a little bit about that motive, that emotion, that buying experience? Maybe we can start with millennials, and you guys can give us your insight on the millennial experience and what that means for a retailer, what they need to be thinking about, what they need to be shifting with, what they need to be looking at.
Yeah, so I think with millennials, so we'll start there, with smaller, families and they're just starting out, they're looking for more multifunctional furniture where they can hide their kids' junk, but have their house look nice when they want to have company. And then sustainability is also important for millennials. They want to have a brand, or they want to buy from a brand that has a story, that's doing the right thing and has the right behavior. And then in terms of the boomers are downsizing or aging in place. So you have two different things going on at the same time. So they might be looking for smaller furniture if they're downsizing, or pieces that are easier to maneuver around. So for instance, they might not be able to sit down in a low upholstered piece. So the seating height might be important. So there's definite design attributes that you need to be looking for each of the demographics.
I think adding on to that millennial piece, what we see from a lot of our partners is that there's this desire for, to your point, of being able to hide the kids' junk and toys, this more lived in furniture, something that's going to meet my lifestyle. And we've been tracking, I'd say, for the last year or so, that there is a bit of a bright spot in the market when it comes to those millennials that might be growing their family, relocating, having their first home. They need that kid friendly furniture, but they're looking for, even from an advertising and brand perspective, who's selling me something that really fits my lifestyle, to your point, and really aligns with my family's needs.
Think it's important to Jonathan and Stephanie. Let's put some age brackets around these people, right? Your millennials are 28 to 43.
Mhm.
28 to 43. 2.5 trillion spending power. Now your Gen Xers are 44 to 59. They're still leading the way around 3 trillion, but millennials are catching fast. So those millennials are first-time home buyers. They have some kids. Myself, almost I was looking at the demos. I'm like, this is me. I have 2 kids. I just bought a house, right?
Mhm.
Like my couches are being used as trampolines right now. Gen Xers, they've made it. Their kids are maybe getting ready to leave. They're looking for that piece of furniture that is what they've always wanted, but they had kids, they couldn't have it. So the mindset is completely different. And they're looking for, and the millennials, socially influenced, and the Gen Xers are really just looking for who's going to give me the best product of what I want. I've worked hard for this.
And I will, because having taught, so it's the Gen Z population, it's interesting because a lot of them, we know that the trends in Gen Z is that they're living with their parents longer. So they might not have the expectations of buying new furniture for a new apartment as early as other generations may have. But they also are attached to the story, right? And they want to collect those pieces that are meaningful to them, but also affordable to the price point and also accessible to where they are, right? They may be living in dense populations with lack of, with need for public transportation, walking distance sort of thing. So furniture that is able for them to, move around easily, accessible to the stores that are around them, even if they may purchase it online later. So again, a lot of the attributes that we're seeing in other generations, Gen Z is sort of adapting to, but at a much slower pace. But that also means that they are living in an environment where those furniture choices are going to influence what they intend to buy, right? So, or maybe what they kind of bring with them into their next living space. So there's still a factor on all of this, but they're sort of not right where a lot of the other generations were at this point.
It's an interesting perspective because our industry is so fueled by moving, by home buying, right? And I think that a lot of our industry is feeling that right now. Home sales are not up over the past few years, and it's reflective of some of the sales happening in our industry. But I was looking at some data, and I saw that over the past 40 years, the average home buyer's age, whether newer or renewing home, back 40 years ago was age 31 is when you would see the average home purchaser, and now it's 49. And so when we talk about, yes, there is more buying power in that boomer generation, we're also seeing that it is that generation that is the average home purchaser. And so how does that influence what we're talking about? Where do you put your energy into millennials? Do you put your energy into the boomer? There's more money in the boomer category. Where should a retailer be putting their attention and priorities?
Well, I think for, we all know boomers still have all the money, right? So obviously they're the easiest ones to target, but they might not be buying as much product anymore. So it's important to build your retail brand with the next generation. So it's important to be targeting the Gen X and the Gen Z and millennials because they might not be thinking about going to an actual brick and mortar store. So we need to look at different ways to get them. So, using social media and different types of driving traffic like email marketing and that kind of thing for the different generations is so important to be telling your story.
I would even speak to the aspirational vision. This is more of a long-term strategy. So, but you do want to try to cultivate that aspirational vision for the younger audiences. So a lot of times becomes a public outreach effort, right? And putting on that public relations hat and finding the TV shows that, Gen Z and millennials are watching more of. How do you get your products in those TV shows, right? This is the whole system, right? Sometimes it's serendipitous. Sometimes it's very strategic, but these are the other things that we want to see. Influencers using your product, even if it's just in the background, even if it's not intentional, right? Where it's not like, oh, now I'm sitting down on this couch from so-and-so. It's just in the background. And it becomes a part of that aesthetic that a certain generation sort of grows up with or sees more of. So a lot of it is more long-term promotional strategies because that was kind of seeps into that design aesthetic that people grow up to on social media and TV and movies.
And that social media piece is so important because we study the path of purchase, especially with younger consumers. And we ask, where are you, when you have a need, if you have to find, I need a new living room set, where are you looking first? They're going to social media. They're looking at what's trending on, and maybe it's TikTok or Instagram. And then from there, they're distilling it down to here's some brands I want to explore, here's some retailers. And we looked at that for millennials, for Gen Z, and even Gen Alpha, and it keeps becoming even more and more important the younger the consumer gets. So as we talk about long-term strategies, making sure that you're featuring yourself as an aspirational brand is key, and also playing in those same channels, being in those media TV shows, maybe it's featuring the sofa in the back, is so important.
I think
Yeah, I mean, I can't be the only one who screenshots my television regularly or uses the like enhanced insights to be like, where did they get that? I want that lamp. I want that coat hanger, right? Like, so we're doing this more and more where it's a second screen environment or sometimes a third screen environment where people are seeing something they like and then actively searching how to get it rather than being driven by, I have a need for something and I need to know where to get it. It's, oh, I like it, I see it, and now I want it.
I think though here we need to take a little bit of a step back
Yeah.
as well and just say, where are we located? Because
Yeah.
Shannon, you had a great point in the home buyer, but if you look at a market like Salt Lake City, that home buyer is a lot younger than South Florida, right? So where are you located and who are you focusing in on, right? How do we stay local to those people around us? And so building a strategy from that demographic is going to be crucial to set yourself up for success. Because if you're just making the assumption, well, the national average is, 45 years old when they buy a house, well, you're going to be missing the boat right away. So all of the stuff you do following it isn't relevant to who you're actually trying to capture. So really unpacking who these people are.
That's a really good point. Like one of the most the question that comes up so often is how do I target each of the generations to come to my store? And my question is, do you? Or do you really figure out who you are at your core and go to a niche? What's the pros and cons of each strategy that a retailer should be thinking about?
A lot of that comes down to how much money you have to market, right? So if you're doing really well with Gen Xers and that's your bread and butter, then you need to stick with that, but start looking ahead and saying, where can we siphon off some budget to start targeting more millennials to set ourselves up for the future, right? So on this call, I see a couple of different clients, but we have people, large retailers, we have smaller retailers, two completely different strategies, right? The larger retailers, they have where they can train, adopt AI, augmented reality, all that stuff that what consumers are looking for, they have the money to be able to fund that. And your smaller retailers, more the mom and pops, what's a little bit harder is they don't have the funds to do augmented reality and AI. Not saying they don't have the funds, but they're going to have to be a little bit more creative and prioritize what's going to set themselves up for success. So when you talk about who do you go after, you want to look at who you're doing really well with, and then how do we start pivoting to the next generation? Because millennials are going to be Gen Xers eventually, right?
When I think as the furniture designer on the panel, we're all marketing the same thing, right? We're all marketing the actual product and getting the people into the stores so that they can buy what we have. So it's so important to talk about the bells and the whistles of the furniture, the design, the quality. So that is a story that really hits with all the different generations. So as long as you're really targeting the actual product, I think you're safe too.
One thing I'm not hearing us kind of talk about that I've noticed significantly as I go from retailer to retailer is how reflective their sales staff is of the customers that they serve. So whether it's a Spanish speaking community or we did a tour of the top 100 a few years ago to really look at recruitment. And we spent our time in Florida, and there was one brand that was all about the Spanish speaking customer and Spanish speaking employee. And then we went to another brand, and it was really catered to a demographic that was over the age of 60, and that was what was represented on their floor. How much of a factor is who's selling in the entire model? I know that that's not a common conversation. Normally, we're talking a little bit more about merchandising and where we're marketing, but what about the sales piece?
Yeah,
From my perspective, oh, go ahead, Scott.
go ahead, Stephanie.
I don't think it matters. I think as long as you have an educated retail sales associate, it doesn't matter. As long as they are able to answer the questions and direct people to what they're looking for, it doesn't particularly matter.
I also think it's the price point of your product, right? So if you're selling fully customizable furniture, that a dresser is, going for $8,000, the person needs to know the product in and out. They need to be an expert. The Gen Xers are going in for those consultations, where the millennials, when we're going after some of the products that maybe aren't as expensive, we need the tools to visualize it in our space. And so when we go in store, the salesperson just really has to be able to handle the transaction a little bit more, right? They don't need as much knowledge as if you're dealing with Gen Xers. But it's really about, it's not about who they are, it's just how they're selling the product. No one wants to be sold.
Mhm.
Right. So that's really what we need to lean into here. I think when you go more in like the Spanish speaking and the demographics like that, it is in your favor to have Spanish speaking salespeople. Of course, if somebody comes in and only speaks Spanish, right, we need to match that. So identifying those opportunities.
And I will say, I mean, the human connection piece is really big, especially for your younger audiences. They do, I mean, I think sometimes we confuse the fact that they're digital natives with the fact that they're wanting more of a digital online experience. But what we're seeing is that they really do thrive off of that human connection. So they will use, online chat and chatbots and AI, messaging for the little things, but they really want to be able to connect to someone and be able to ask questions, whether it's over the phone or in person. So making, leading with empathy, compassion, getting to know the person, really building those relationships is a huge part of a younger generation's thought process when it comes to establishing trust with the brand. Whereas, the older audiences, maybe boomers want more of that, but I think there's a lot of understanding of how they can access that information online, whereas millennials, I think, are really seeking that human connection more, especially with Gen Z as well coming up behind.
And in a study we did, Marissa, to your point, millennials are making a comeback for in-store. So as we're all sitting here panicking, how are we going to drive in-store traffic? Millennials are making a comeback. They want to go in-store. However, the first touch point is the digital piece.
Right.
To make it seamless to go in store. So numbers are trending in the right direction for millennials.
Yeah, I mean, and again, that first touch is important, I think, for everything. I mean, I think that has been established as sort of a constant where, do you have a functioning website? Does it look good? Have you been updating your social media? Is it consistent? Is there consistency across all of those touch points? That is going to solidify trust immediately within your customer so that then they feel empowered to take the next steps.
This is let's talk a little about that. Like I think it's, we can find where we can advertise. We could definitely start there, but let's talk about the omni-channel journey for each of those demographics. So can we talk about where are the millennials starting out? Where are they getting ideas from? What's driving them in? What are their, I just heard a nice foray into the shift going back into in-store versus online. So we could talk about the millennials purchase path, and then talk about maybe how that differs a bit from our other two generations, our boomers and our Gen X.
I could start and dive in. Like what we see with the millennials, it's entirely starting online. It might be starting on social media. Maybe it's they're a little older. Maybe it's Facebook. Maybe it's Instagram. But they're seeing something that might pique their interest, and then they're diving a little bit further. Maybe from there they'll say, "No, they saw some really interesting furniture in someone's story about their house." And now I'm going to go to Reddit and research a little bit more. So there's almost like this start with a trust but verify. They say, well, this looks interesting. I'm going to do my own due diligence. And then if they want to continue, they're going to go into a store. But I think talking about an omni-channel piece, there's a certain sense of frustration that we see across the board when that online experience doesn't really match what's in store. So if the look and flow of your website might be one thing, but then when the customer goes to the store, your terms and conditions are listed differently, or the way that you're categorizing your store, laying it out doesn't match with how things are on the website, that's a point of frustration for the customer. So they're starting online, but they're expecting that positive experience that they had continues when they visit the store and when they interact with your associates, interact with the manager, or whoever else it might be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we see in research too is that the customer experience across channels can either save or break your brand, right? Because really only it takes as one touch point to sort of disconnect from the experience for it to have a negative impact. But the better that customer experience, that leads to word of mouth, that leads to, you know, the next iteration and maybe repeat buying. So it's really important for when you're thinking about who your audience is, thinking about what are those individual touch points that they can interact with and how do they complement each other? Where is there a disconnect or a breakdown in the system, making sure that your customer service reps understand who's been interacting on social media, you know, who is on the email list, you know, that type of thing. And making sure that those touch points are really cohesive, because really all it takes is, you can have a lot of great touch points, but if they're not properly connected, it's a breakdown of that system.
You brought up a really interesting point, Jonathan, that I had not thought about when you had said Reddit was a path to the purchase. Because I think about Pinterest, right? The planners, the ideators, and then they start to do research after they've kind of started to build their brain about what they might want to do. And Reddit, I have not thought about at all. And so in real time, I'm like, who's on furniture shopping on Reddit? And I'm realizing really it's these discussion boards. And I'm part of, when I moved to Greenville, I joined all these local groups, and every single day, every group has 5 questions on there. And every group, where should I go to buy furniture? Where should I go to buy furniture? Where should I go to buy furniture? So can we talk a little bit about, that's a path I don't think we're talking about a lot, is that we're using social media to get a testimony, to get an idea. So why aren't we using things like Google reviews to maybe do that? Or is the recommendation a preliminary step? Like, what's happening there? Is that targeting toward one generation versus another?
So I think what we saw specifically is that there's all these different review sites out there, but a lot of times there's a sense of, is that really an honest review? Did someone get paid to say that? Was it a bot that wrote it? But on Reddit, I mean, there's a Reddit thread for any topic you can imagine. There's ones for, you want to go on a vacation, here's 20 different resorts in Mexico you can look at. Each one has a Reddit thread. And on that, we find that the consumer feels a bit more at ease, because while you're not seeing someone's name, you're seeing their handle. And you feel like this is a real person sharing their own experience with the brand. Does that align with what I saw on social media that we know might be a little bit glitzier, might be a little bit elevated if it's an influencer, but now I'm getting that raw deal on Reddit, and now I can actually verify, is that true, and is this something I want to continue with?
Yeah, and you don't
And
have
you
to
can see that, you can see that, Jonathan, in
Yeah.
Google, right? Google, when you go to Google search, what are they prioritizing?
Exactly.
You see the very first is AI, right? Companies have to be in AI. Next, Reddit threads,
Yep, that's what I was gonna say.
location pages, sponsored ads. So when you're talking about your SERP being number one in SEO, well, number one on the Google page is probably the last one. So you have all this other stuff that Google's starting to prioritize ahead of you. So those are the things you need to say. Am I showing up in AI? Am I showing up on the Reddit threads? What are the narratives on the Reddit threads? Those are, because those narratives, there's some truth behind them. Google reviews and all of that is still really, Gen Xers lean still more towards customer testimonials and Google reviews. They're a little bit more traditional. They're still, it's really a shift between Gen Xers and millennials, where Gen Xers are still on TV and Gen Xers are starting to shift to social first. This is like the last piece before we go fully digital. So Gen Xers, you can still find those clients on TV. Marissa, you were going to say something.
Oh, no, I was saying exactly the same thing that you said. I'm glad you said it. It was that, you know, you don't have to be a Reddit user to find those threads on Reddit, right? They come up on Google searches quite readily. And so it's sometimes a great social proof, right? Like, oh, people have similar questions. You know, I want to get their experiences. And kind of the beauty of those Reddit conversations is some of them can be, you know, years old, but it shows that there's still people talking about it. So it's still influencing the conversation. Easier to find than you would any other social, where, you know, finding something from 2 days ago is harder, right? And then the other piece of it too is that for a brand perspective, it's not necessarily that it's your responsibility to insert yourself into those conversations, but that social listening piece is key, because you understand what people are associating with your brand and the conversations that are taking place around the products that you might offer, so that you can bring that into your messaging and bring that into those customer conversations. And so it's a really great piece of intelligence that you don't necessarily get to have access to so readily.
I think, Marissa, more importantly than the Google reviews and the Reddit is if your ideal consumer is a millennial, that you have an influencer strategy that is sound and solid for the year. And
Yeah.
it's not the strategy of, oh, this person reached out, they have 5 million, now 5 million users, they're going to take some pictures, they're going to do all this, and we're going to get some clicks, we're going to get some likes. It needs to be a strategy session. It can be something as simple as in an Excel document, who we're trying to go after, what they're trying to achieve, what is our budget, and go from there. What are we trying to do? In-store traffic, right? In-store traffic, we're going to want to go local influencers. Those local influencers have more impact because a lot of the millennials are in social media. They have a bigger impact than a lot of the Google reviews and stuff online that you're seeing. So if that's not sound, that needs to be top priority as of January.
What demographic is listening to the voice of an influencer? And then at what level are we talking about micro influencers that are local? Are we talking about celebrities, macro influencers? Like, what are we talking about and who's listening to those opinions?
It's a great question because really whatever your goal is what you're going to be choosing. So if you're looking at a macro level, right, that's more of a brand awareness play. They have millions of followers, people that are engaging, they're commenting, but the influencer isn't necessarily commenting back. So that's more of your brand awareness. If you're looking for, as I mentioned just a second ago, in-store traffic, you need to find someone who's local that can show up in your store, that can experience your product, that can take it home, continue following up. And where we're sharing that, when we talk about Google and search and what's happening with AI hasn't penetrated YouTube as heavily yet. So think about your influencer strategy and how are you going to cross-platform that into YouTube where it's not so distorted by AI. It's a search engine. YouTube is a search engine. So macro for brand awareness, micro for more of that niche in-store purchase traffic.
When I've also seen lately some really great customer videos of testimonials of after they got the product in their home and they're talking about how they set it up and what it looks like. And so it's not just stagnant pictures, it's actually video and them talking about how excited they are for the delivery truck to show up and then setting it up. And so I think that's exciting as a consumer watching that too.
Love that you spoke about this macro because one of the most common things that I hear is how do we get more focus on the furniture industry, how we got milk the furniture industry. And I've watched the ins and the outs of that Got Milk campaign. It really wasn't actually a successful campaign when you look at the numbers. And it was all this macro, right? Use those big name celebrities, draw some awareness to the fact that milk exists. But it never actually had a sustainable journey in the traction of what you're talking about, where there's that micro. It's what's happening at a local level that does that. So can we talk a little bit about what generation is using what channel and what content do you create for those generations?
Creating content is just the first start, right?
Yeah.
If you're not creating consistent content, and you see this in different channels, then that's the first start. People are going on these channels for entertainment. So if your Instagram or your Facebook, which Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, millennials, right? Facebook is more your Gen Xers, YouTube as well. If you're going on Instagram and all you're saying is promotions, look at these towels, come in, stop by, buy one, get one 40% off, buy two pillows, get the third one free, whatever the promotion is, that's not what people are going on social media for. People are going on social media to see fun, entertaining things. So instead of showcasing pillows, buy one, get one 40% off, showcase it like, how many pillows do you think we can stack high before they fall over? Wait till the end to find out. That's the gold. That's when the magic is happening. All of the sales promo, retarget those people with ads. That's when you hit them with the ad messaging. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
This is like a whole session on it, right, Marissa? Like we could,
yes,
this is
definitely.
a 60-minute conversation.
I
We're trying to
know.
get it down to like a minute.
But really it comes down to like authenticity. I mean, like I call myself a social media strategist, but I think I'm actually just a content marketing strategist at the whole, because people always start the conversation of like, well, what do I do on social media? Well, what do you want to do? What excites you? What makes you happy? Like, how talk about the things that people don't usually talk about, but you can do it. You don't have to make it an hour-long conversation. Please don't. We want it to be very bite-sized, very consumable, something that can show up in my feed based off of the algorithm, and not, again, type promotional things might get really lost in it because they might be outdated very quickly. So again, getting to know the people in the store, getting to know the products, how are they made? Who is their designer on feature this week? What are the materials you're choosing? Things that you would want to see as a consumer, right? And I think even though, yes, this is all about marketing and advertising, when it becomes less about that as the goal of what you're producing, it becomes more about who you are and what like what you do. And the more likable you are, the more personable you are, the more we want to see that, right? So it seems maybe a little bit counterintuitive, but it really does start with, the brand, the identity first, and then the products later.
I think the brand that comes to mind that did that so drastically was Nutter Butter, if you guys recall, like what they've done on the TikTok scene. And it's the weirdest thing. I don't think I've seen anything mention of a cookie, and I don't understand it, which means I am not their demographic, because
Right.
somebody's on a drug trip that is doing those things, but it is so followed, so talked about, and sales
Right.
are correlating, and it's so confusing to me. And that's okay. I don't have to get it, but I think that speaks to a large volume. And the other one that's speaking to me, that girl that does the logos, the influencer who does like logo design, and then she was hired by Microsoft and the Detroit Lions, and she was just so well received. But it's like people get that personal relationship with somebody, and then what happens between the brands is still just very authentic. It's not about promoting the brand. It's about how that person building the relationship with the brand. And I think that's where I've seen our industry have the biggest misses. Is it's not about showroom shows. It's not about showing the product. It's not about explaining your brand. It's about building a relationship with the person where they're at, and through. And so one of the questions that comes in is like, if you do want to go with this micro strategy and use influencers, how do you even find them?
I think it's talking to, I mean, there's a lot of different avenues you can do. Obviously, there are a lot of firms that you can use, online resources that will connect you with, brand collaborators and things like that. And that can be a great first step and a kind of a nice wade into the waters to sort of see what you get for that. But a lot of times it comes down to knowing your audience, right? Who are they following? Who do they want to talk to? What is happening in the communities, right? Really tapping into the conversationalists. And again, it really comes down to, I mean, social media is not used the same way by every single person, right? Some people are more driven to comment and curate or create on behalf of someone, and the rest of us are sort of voyeurs, right? We're kind of engaging with that content, but we're not going to produce that content. So again, it comes to understanding your audience, and really understanding, and I I use this reference with my students so I can feel cool, but it's really true. You're Chapel Roan. You are your artist's favorite artists, right? It's not about who your audience is necessarily, but who is influencing your audience. So this might not be a very, direct answer to this question, but you really do need to tap into what is your audience watching? Where are they finding their information? What are they likely to share? What are they likely to be talking about? And how can you capitalize on that?
Yeah, Marissa, you're spot on. There's agencies that handle this. There are platforms where you can go out and say, this is who I'm looking for. And you could, just like you're filtering for a pair of shoes, right? There's platforms that do that. I still hold true to, if you pick up your phone, you go to Instagram, and you're in the consumer journey yourself and find the people that way. It's a little bit more time consuming, but if you're picking up Instagram, you're going through, you're finding it. And we are leaning into something here at Elevate, and authenticity. We like to coin it as raw authenticity. Like these influencers, they have to be so relatable. Otherwise, to Jonathan, you said this earlier, people are going to sniff it out, and they're not they're gonna call BS. And that's the last thing you want. You want this influencer who has kids whose house is a mess. That's gonna relate really well with someone like me, a millennial, who I'm just trying to get through with my kids, right? So when you're looking for these influencers, there's tons of platforms out there, but really just picking up your phone and seeing if they match your brand is the best way. And just start with an Excel spreadsheet and just start writing them down and going through them. And it's almost like an email cadence that you end up doing.
And that relatability is key because we ask the consumers when they said, I go to all these different sites, I see these influencers, because in the back of their mind, they know that they're probably being supported by the brand, they're getting some kind of a kickback, some kind of a commission. But if they feel that they can relate to them, if they feel that that reflects myself at home, my messy house as a millennial myself, then that's okay. Because there's still that certain level of trust that kind of overcomes what's happening on the back end where maybe they're being supported or maybe they're being paid for by the brand because I trust them and I relate.
Mhm.
Which we can then see go in the opposite direction when it doesn't feel authentic. I think there was like that one piece of drama with the eyelash situation, I think, that came up last year, if you guys recall this like incident of this very well-known like beauty influencer promoting a brand, not using the actual product and looking for the authenticity in that relationship. You know, one of the things that it's actually backwards is I've heard you guys say over and over is just look at what you have in front of you. And it reminds me of this story. I don't know if anyone that's listening or any of you guys know Greg Rich, who is the founder and CEO over at Habitation in Minneapolis. And that is the prime person that this speaks of for me, where Greg was importing furniture and he realized that he had a niche in divorced middle-aged men. And what he ended up doing was sourcing more and more product that spoke to that particular demographic. And his product, his brand, everything about his journey is now a man cave. He markets to the man cave. He has this very specific feel. You walk in, your experiences, you get a bourbon and a cigar. Like you get these really, really neat experiences. You get a very specific kind of salesperson or interior designer that's going to help you relive your, your bachelor with this time, maybe you have money kind of journey. And it's made his story so easy and it has made his brand so authentic because he knows exactly who he is, what he's selling, that he's become extremely successful kind of within that whole journey. And I love that story because I think so much of the conversation is I'm trying to be everything to everyone. And I'm just trying to figure out how to get more of those everyone's here. And I think so much of our conversation around marketing is always, well, just try a bunch of stuff. But how important is it to try to maybe really look at what you've got in front of you and spend a little bit more time, energy, and money focusing on those people and understanding maybe how you got them in the first place?
Yeah, Shannon, people really just want practical tips, right? Positivity, fresh ideas, and a sense of style. And if you can hit those four things, you're gold. I think it's important though to talk about we talked about micro, but on the macro level, if you're someone who's leaning into those macro influencers, right? You have to make it relatable. You cannot have somebody as a macro influencer going into a store thinking that, oh, I'm going and shopping and I'm getting all my bedroom furniture and my living room furniture. And the consumer's like, this person is not shopping there. I'm sorry. So you twist it. You put a twist on it and make it fun. The person instead is going to the store and saying, I'm going to see if I can deck out my my living room under $2,000 and I'm going to see how many colors I can get for here. And you make it fun content that then isn't like, oh, this person's only doing this because they're getting paid. You see how the twist is different?
Yep, absolutely. So Stephanie, Jonathan, we have spent a lot of time on the content. I want to dive in because I think one of the biggest things that everyone here wants, give me data, give me insight, help me understand the thoughts, anticipated buying patterns. What are you guys seeing in the data based on different demographics? What are you seeing now? How is that changing in the future? Help us better wrap our heads around what's going on and how it's going to be changing.
In terms of actual product?
Just the consumer in general. I mean, yeah, it could be product, how they're buying. I heard Scott earlier saying that millennials are shifting to an in-store experience. That's new information for me. But can you walk us through what's happening with the consumer? How do we better connect? Like where do we put our focus this year?
I could dive in. I think as a whole, what we're seeing with the consumer, especially now in 2025, is this overwhelming sense that they're looking for value. And a lot of that came from the high prices that we saw in the last couple of years. Inflation, we know the consumers are still hyper focused on something like the price of milk, the price of eggs, especially now with the avian flu. But they're looking at value in the bigger picture. What is a brand giving back to me? So not only am I getting something that's at a good price point, but am I buying a product that aligns with the type of style I'm looking for? If I'm looking for something for my house that's kind of warm, cozy, lifestyle, this lived in kind of a motif where they know that they could open up the hatch on their ottoman and throw all the kids' stuff away when the guests are coming over, or if they know that they have furniture that the kids can jump on and turn into a trampoline, it's going to be okay. So they're looking for value like that from a brand, but then they're also looking at the path to purchase of maybe I'm a millennial and I'm starting online. And am I having a smooth journey as I transition into the store? Is that sales representative going to be able to answer my questions and help guide the final purchase? Whereas maybe a baby boomer has some different needs and they're going into the store and now they have a very different expectation of what they're getting. But to them, having that representative that's able to answer all the specific questions about the high quality product that they've dreamed of and now they can afford because the kids are out of the house, that's value to them. So I think it's looking holistically at value across the board, especially in this category, is something that's going to be important. And then another note just on the younger consumer, we talked about this a little before, but we continue to see in our data that it's the younger consumers that are going into the stores that are making those purchases, especially the millennials, and knowing that they're going to have different needs and they're probably going to have a bit of a different price point that tends to be lower too. So taking all that into account as well.
And I think to piggyback off of what Jonathan just said, it's so important that your retail sales associates are educated. So I went to a store yesterday looking for appliances, and what I was looking for was not in the store. And so I had to go find someone to ask, is this here? And I'm not seeing it. And she couldn't answer the question. So she had to go find someone else. And I knew that the line of the appliances that I was looking for was bigger than what was actually in the store, but there was no information at all. There was no sales materials. There was no one that could answer my question. And so I left the store feeling so frustrated. I'm like, I'm here, I'm ready to spend money. And no one wanted me to buy anything. So I left feeling very frustrated.
I just got some retailers that messaged me to say, we got you, we'll get you set up with some appliances. Perfect, we'll get you set up out there.
Great.
Shannon,
I think that's a quick question that I just wanted to piggyback real quick on before you jump in, Scott. Is that part of like a demographical buying journey? So like my question I'm just thinking about going through that and how does that need for information change generationally? Does it have to be a person? Is there value to bring technology into that experience and that endless aisle concept? Do we need to extend the online experience in store more? Or is it about training salespeople better? And does that vary by the generational need?
So I could jump in. I think from a generational standpoint, we see that the younger consumer is just more accustomed to having everything at their fingertips. They're spending hours a day in social media, whether it's scrolling for entertainment, doing research on Reddit. So because they have more information available, they kind of have this expectation that if I'm going to buy appliances, that retailer will list, maybe it's on their website, maybe it's somewhere else in that digital experience, everything that's available, all the different types of features that I could purchase. And when I go into store, maybe that's where I fine tune exactly what I'm looking for, but the information's available. We see that with product, we see that with financing, we see it with all different types of categories that they want to have the information available more of a self-serve. And even surprisingly, when it comes to baby boomers, I know, it's easy to assume that an older consumer is not necessarily going to be surfing the web, making online purchases, doing that due diligence. But in our purchase journey analysis, when we spoke with baby boomers, the number one place they were shopping just for everyday things was Amazon, which was surprising because they said I primarily go there. I could get stuff shipped to my house in 2 days, and they're able to give me a lot of information about the product, about the features. So it's important to know that even with older consumers, they're probably going to want to have some of that self-serve information available too.
And let's just rip the Band-Aid off. AI is going to serve every single generation that we're talking about right now, right? For millennials, your AI is going to be more of the recommendations. They're going to interact with those chatbots, those AR tools. Now your Gen Xers are going to use it differently. They're going to use it for more of a resource on information, in-depth reviews. And your baby boomers are going to use it probably more as a customer service tool, right? They're going to, I need a little help finding this, or I need a little, it's going to be an entry level requirement along with wellness. Wellness is continuing to rise. And just in one of our studies, it was almost 90%. So that means 9 out of 10 consumers have insufficient sleeping habits, which means there's a huge market in that and a priority for them to, they're recognizing it. So it's how are you highlighting to help them, right? How are you to make things easier? Maybe we can help using those phrases in your marketing message. And then the sustainability in your products, everything needs to have, it's just the cost of entry at this point. Everything needs to have, if the material is made out of something that's really eco-friendly, if the wood is, all of that needs to be listed, easy for consumers to digest.
Yeah, I mean, and even speaking to the AI part, especially with younger audiences, it's a research tool. So instead of me having to do my own research on Google or whatever and put all those sources together, I can go into ChatGPT or whatever tool and say, hey, what should I consider when buying my first couch or whatever, or tell me the best, sofas on the market sort of thing. So again, these are not, these are just really good tools for you, the retailer, to be using yourself to sort of see what comes up, mimicking that language, echoing that language in your messaging, and also seeing how you can be adding to that repository of information that is going to be accessed.
That's fair. Jonathan, the one thing I don't think we've talked about is how financing factors in with the different generations. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the use of primary and tertiary and secondary and afterpays, like these kind of different options, how maybe preferences amongst the different generations, how they influence the shopping experience and the shopping journey?
Right, absolutely. So I think on financing, one thing that we found first and foremost is that there's this expectation that the information is going to be available early in that purchase journey. And we found it out because when we were asking the consumer, when it comes time to make the purchase, do you like to kind of look at all the information at that point in time, make a decision? And they kept telling us, as I start doing my due diligence, as I start looking at retailers, different products, I want to know early on what type of financing is available. Do you have some kind of a store, maybe a co-branded card with promotional financing? Do you have something where I could pay this off in 4 and 12 payments? Or maybe there's some other type of financial arrangement that's available, but they want to know that going in. And then the other piece that we see is also choice and flexibility, especially with younger consumers. We're just saying, I don't want to go in and spend several $1,000s on a piece of furniture and only have one option when it comes to financing, knowing that they're all going to have different needs, different financial situations. They'd like to be able to have choices, and maybe it's 2 or 3 that are available, and they could choose the one that's best for them. And you could bet that by the time they're making that purchase, they've already done research on those different alternatives. So they might just need the representative in the store to clarify some questions or maybe help guide that final part of the decision.
Yeah, and just to chime in here, financing is one of those other things. I know I've said it, I think 3 times now, cost of entry, right? Everyone, you have to be able to offer it. Millennials are looking more at the BNPL, and Jonathan maybe has some research around it, but the buy now, pay later, right? So on Instagram, they see somebody, an influencer who's using that, then they're retargeted on YouTube later, right? That's how it works for them. For Gen Xers, they see a Google ad, right? They see a Google ad, they land on the Google ad, and then they get an email about in-store financing so that they know the option is there. We're seeing in our research, financing is a must have. And a lot of them are looking, especially because interest rates are so high, right? That 0%, that's where you need to be.
And interesting that in the buy now pay later, we certainly see that for younger consumers, there's more of an expectation or maybe a preference, but you're not necessarily going to take a $5,000 purchase and split that up into 4 or 5 payments. So I think it's more just the nomenclature around that of I'm buying something now, I'm paying it later with something like 0%, because that's almost like, to your point, the cost of entry. And if you listen to different national retailers out there, they're saying we're selling brand new mattresses, buy now, pay later with 25 interest-free payments. So it's more just knowing that they have those options and that flexibility versus a specific tool that only has 4 or 5 payments.
Yeah, you guys are bringing up a really interesting point. Something that comes to mind that we just don't talk enough about in this industry is the dupe.com and the popularity of that, especially amongst millennial and Gen Z buyers, where this website's getting, 1 million hits a month. And the second biggest thing that there's being searched for is furniture. And it's dragging them to places like Wayfair, West Elm, Overstock, which kind of contradicts everything we're saying. They want that in-store experience. They're saying that, we're saying that maybe they want a different kind of purchase journey. So can you help like, where does a retailer do when all these emerging technologies are really like, I think if I was a retailer, I'd be sitting here and I'd be talking about what's my purchase journey, and I'd be trying to do that. But there's so many new things that are steering people off the purchase journey. And how do I use all this data that's out there to help me make the smartest decision for whoever I've determined as my target market?
The first thing that comes to mind for me is you have to make your case, right? You know who the competition is. You know the convenience factors that are, are at play. And so again, if you're a mom and pop, if you're a local store, you have to sort of make the argument for what are the benefits? What are you getting that you may not be getting elsewhere? Also, what are you contributing to? Hey, do you want to, enhance the economy of the community? Well, shop local. Here's what you get, from the in-store experience, and really kind of creating that experience that you want to have. It's not that you have to pretend that, the competitors don't exist. You just sort of have to be honest about it. Yeah, you do have to come into our store and buy it, right? But that doesn't mean that it can't be convenient, it can't be affordable, it can't be a meaningful experience. You just kind of have to rewrite the script. And don't assume that your audience knows what those benefits are, right? Which is why you're there. Hey, when you shop local, when you come into my store, you're helping to support this thing that's bigger than ourselves, right? And again, making that connection. Because again, it's also understanding your customers, frustrations and pain points. So maybe it is free delivery. Maybe it is, giving them the opportunity to try and buy, that type of thing. So that you can compete with the larger brands, but you're really bringing it down to a very personalized experience.
We only have a few minutes left, and I want to go around the room one time, and I'd like you guys to give the retailers one piece of advice that they can take from today, need to think about or implement, something that they can take and go make some smart decisions on. What is the biggest gem or piece of advice each of you can give them? Jonathan, would you mind starting us off?
Yeah, I'd say you want to take some time to put yourself in the customer's shoes. Go through what that purchase journey looks like. Look at what your website is, your social media platforms. Is that consistent with what that in-store experience is across channels? Because regardless of whether someone is a Gen Z, an X, millennial, boomer, they're going to expect consistency, and they're going to expect something that has limited friction as they move through.
Awesome. Thank you. How about you, Stephanie?
I think being authentic to your brand is so important, whether it's social media or email or actually in the store, making sure that you give the consumer the best experience that you know how, and that follows across all the different channels of marketing. That, if you're a fun brand and you're showing the behind the scenes of, like, I forget who said stacking the pillows up 40 high, like that should be the same kind of fun experience in the store.
Great. Thank you. How about you, Scott?
It's a very loaded question, right? One thing would be really hard. So I would say you need to have the research in-house to build a sound content strategy that's going to humanize your brand, align with their values, understand what they're purchasing. So bedroom furniture, living room furniture, what the priorities of them are, and what is the incentive or no incentive that they're leaning to. What's your USP?
And take us home, Marissa.
I would say stay agile, right? The market is constantly changing. Your audience is constantly changing, and there are outside influencers that are always going to be at play. Staying current, staying agile, just because it worked yesterday doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work today or tomorrow. So really having the freedom and flexibility to try new things, experiment in the marketplace, keep what keeps working and get rid of the rest.
This is really great. I really want to thank each of you guys for coming in today, sharing your expertise. I hear some great takeaways. Put yourself in the customer's shoes and go through the purchase journey. Do some research in-house and really figure out how to create a sound content plan, understanding who your customer is. Be authentic to exactly who you are and your brand, and then just be flexible enough to be able to change as the market changes, because things are indeed changing fast. So I want to thank you, Jonathan, Marissa, Stephanie, and Scott. Thank you for coming in, sharing all of your experience. For those of you watching, please don't forget to explore some of our resources and some of the upcoming webinars for more strategies to help drive your business forward. For those of you waiting for the synchrony code, it is TRENDS25. That's TRENDS 25, and it's worth 1,000 points. Our next webinar will be on Thursday, February 20th, and it is on let AI revolutionize your advertising. So thank you guys all for tuning in today, and thanks for making HFA part of your journey to help just advance retail business success in general. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you soon.